Most people think blood pressure is all about salt, but let me tell you about something I see almost every week in the emergency department that makes absolutely no sense on the surface. I'll check someone's blood pressure, and it's sitting at 160 over 95. A bit concerning, yes. So, I ask about their diet. Oh, I eat really well, they say. Lots of vegetables, home-cooked meals. I don't add salt to anything. I ask about exercise. I walk 5,000 steps most days, sometimes more, they say. I look at their medication list. Maybe they're already on a blood pressure medication that clearly isn't working well enough. And I'm standing there looking at someone who on paper is doing everything right and their blood pressure is still high. Here's what makes this so frustrating. They aren't lying. They genuinely are eating well. They genuinely are exercising. They've cut the salt out. They've added the cardio. They've done exactly what they were told to do. And the reward they were expecting, which is normal blood pressure, hasn't materialized. What's actually happening is that while they're restricting all the obvious things, there's a hormonal system running in the background, activated every few hours throughout the day, telling their kidneys to hold on to sodium regardless of how little salt they're eating. And most people have no idea this is even happening. My name is Dr. Adrian Cole. I've been working in emergency and internal medicine for over 20 years. And over that time, I've become fascinated by what actually helps people live longer in a system that mostly reacts to disease instead of preventing it. So today, I want to walk you through something that almost never gets explained when we talk about blood pressure, longevity, and metabolic health. It's not just about what you eat. It's about when your body gets a chance to reset the systems that control pressure in the first place. Because what I've seen again and again is this. You can do almost everything right and still end up with high blood pressure if you're making one fundamental mistake in how your day is structured. Now, before we get into those hidden causes, I want you to understand why this matters so much, especially if you're over 60. High blood pressure is sometimes called the silent killer, and that phrase gets used so often that it's lost its weight. But I want you to sit with it for a moment. There are no symptoms, no alarm, no pain that tells you something is wrong. You can have blood pressure running at dangerous levels for years and feel perfectly fine. Meanwhile, that elevated pressure is quietly damaging the walls of your arteries, straining your heart, affecting blood flow to your kidneys, and increasing your risk of stroke every single day. After 60, the stakes go up considerably. Your arteries are naturally a little stiffer than they were at 40. Your kidneys are a bit slower at filtering. Your heart has to work harder to compensate for those changes. So when blood pressure stays elevated on top of all of that, the damage accumulates faster. And the tragedy is that many of the people I see who suffer strokes or heart attacks in their 60s and 70s were not sitting around eating fast food and ignoring their health. They were trying. They just didn't know what they were missing. So let me explain the framework first, because once you understand this, everything else will make a lot more sense. Your body has several systems that control blood pressure. Most people have heard of one of them, which is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. That's a mouthful, so let's just call it the pressure regulation system. Think of it like a dial inside your body. When your blood pressure is too low, this system turns up the dial. It signals your kidneys to hold onto more sodium and water, which increases blood volume, which raises pressure. When things are balanced, the dial comes down. It's supposed to be a dynamic, responsive system. The problem is that in many people after 60, this system gets stuck. The dial stays turned up even when it shouldn't be. And here's the key thing. Salt is only one of the inputs. Hormones, sleep quality, stress patterns, meal timing, gut bacteria, and even your breathing patterns at night all influence whether that dial goes up or stays up. So if you're only managing salt and nothing else, you're addressing maybe 20% of the picture and wondering why the other 80% isn't cooperating. Think of it like a thermostat in an old house. You keep turning it down, but the furnace has a fault. It fires up on its own every few hours regardless of what you set. The room stays warm, not because you're doing something wrong, because the system itself has a glitch that no one has diagnosed. That's exactly what I want to help you understand today, because there are specific, identifiable reasons why that system gets stuck, and most of them have nothing to do with salt. Here are 8 real reasons why healthy people still develop high blood pressure after 60. The first one is poor sleep quality, and I don't mean just getting fewer hours. I want to separate two things here because most people lump them together. There's sleep duration, which is how many hours you sleep. And then there's sleep architecture, which is the quality and structure of that sleep. You can spend 8 hours in bed and still have terrible sleep architecture if you're waking frequently, if you're sleeping lightly, or if you're not reaching the deeper stages of sleep that your body actually needs to reset. Here's what happens during deep sleep. Your blood pressure drops, sometimes by 10 to 20%. That drop is called nocturnal dipping, and it's not just rest. It's active repair. Your cardiovascular system uses that window to recover from the day's demands. Your hormones recalibrate. Your kidneys offload excess fluid. When that window is disrupted night after night, your pressure regulation system never fully resets. It starts each morning already slightly elevated. And over time, that becomes your new baseline. I had a patient a few years ago, a retired schoolteacher, 67 years old. She was meticulous about her health, took her medication faithfully, ate a clean diet, went to bed at the same time every night. But her blood pressure would not budge below 150. We ran her through a sleep study and found she had moderate sleep apnea. She stopped breathing dozens of times every night. Each time that happened, her brain sent out a stress signal, which spiked her pressure. She'd been doing this for years without knowing it. We got her treated for the apnea, and within 3 months her blood pressure dropped significantly. The medication she was on started actually working. Nothing about her diet changed. Nothing about her exercise changed. Just her sleep. Does this sound like you? If you snore, if you wake up feeling tired even after a full night, or if someone has told you that you stop breathing in your sleep, that's worth investigating before you try anything else. The next one is something that almost everyone over 60 is dealing with to some degree, and it goes almost entirely unaddressed. Chronic low-grade stress is the second cause, and I'm not talking about the kind of stress you feel before a big presentation. I'm talking about the kind that lives quietly in the background. The worry about finances, the grief after losing a spouse or a close friend, the sense of not being as capable as you once were, the subtle anxiety that comes with aging. These aren't dramatic stressors, but they're constant. And that constancy is the problem. When your body perceives a threat, it releases cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones raise your blood pressure as part of the fight or flight response. That's useful if you're running from something. It's damaging if the signal never turns off. Cortisol, when chronically elevated, directly tells your kidneys to retain sodium. It raises blood sugar. It disrupts sleep. And it feeds directly into that pressure regulation system we talked about, keeping the dial turned up. What makes this particularly hard to see is that people don't identify themselves as stressed. I ask, "Are you under a lot of stress?" And they say, "No, not really. I'm retired. I'm fine." But then I ask a few more questions, and I find out they haven't slept well in 2 years. Their spouse has been ill. They've been handling everything alone, and they haven't had a single day where they genuinely felt at peace. That's chronic stress. It doesn't feel dramatic. It just feels like life, and their body is responding to it every single day. Imagine this. You've been carrying a heavy bag all day. It's not so heavy that you can't manage, but you never put it down. Not at lunch. Not in the evening. Not even when you sleep. After enough time, your shoulders are constantly tight. Your posture has changed. Your body has adapted to the weight. That's what chronic stress does to your cardiovascular system. The tension becomes the baseline. The third reason is one that surprises almost everyone I bring it up with. Your gut bacteria have a significant and direct influence on your blood pressure. This is an area of research that has moved very fast in the last decade, and it's still not making it into most routine medical conversations. But the evidence is solid. The trillions of bacteria that live in your digestive system produce compounds that travel through your bloodstream and interact with your blood vessels and your kidneys. A healthy, diverse gut microbiome helps produce compounds that relax blood vessels and support sodium regulation. An unhealthy gut, one that has been disrupted by antibiotics, by a low-fiber diet over many years, or by chronic stress, produces a different set of compounds. Some of them actually mimic the signals that raise blood pressure. After 60, many people have accumulated years of gut disruption. Antibiotics used for various infections, low-fiber diets through the decades, stress, medications. The microbiome becomes less diverse, and without realizing it, you've lost some of the biological support that was helping keep your pressure in check. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever noticed that your blood pressure fluctuates quite a bit from one reading to the next? Not just slightly, but sometimes by 15 or 20 points. That kind of variability is often a sign that something systemic is going on, not just dietary. Gut health is one of the most commonly overlooked contributors. The fourth reason is something most people actively try to do right, but often get wrong in a very specific way. Exercise timing and type matter more than most people realize. Walking is wonderful. I recommend it to almost everyone. But if walking is the only form of physical activity you're doing, you may be missing the specific kind of stimulus that helps lower blood pressure most effectively. Resistance exercise, which is things like lifting light weights, using resistance bands, or doing body weight movements, has been shown to improve arterial flexibility and reduce resting blood pressure in older adults in ways that walking alone doesn't achieve. Here's the mechanism. As we age, our arteries naturally stiffen. Stiffer arteries mean your heart has to push harder to move blood through them, which raises pressure. Resistance training signals your arteries to remain more flexible. It also improves how your muscles use insulin, which connects directly to the hormonal system that controls pressure. But there's a timing element too. Exercise done consistently at roughly the same time each day helps your body anticipate and prepare for the cardiovascular demand. It supports the natural rhythm of your hormonal cycles. Erratic exercise, some days active, some days completely sedentary, doesn't provide that rhythmic input that your body's pressure regulation system responds to best. I see this often. Someone will tell me they exercise regularly, and when I ask them to describe a typical week, it turns out they're very active on the weekend, mostly sedentary Monday through Friday, and they had a very intense burst of activity once followed by 2 weeks of nothing. That pattern of inconsistency, combined with only doing cardio and nothing else, is often not enough to move the needle on blood pressure. But number 5 is the one I want you to pay very close attention to, because it affects almost everyone in this age group, and almost no one talks about it openly. Insulin resistance is a major and underappreciated driver of high blood pressure. Insulin is the hormone your body uses to move sugar from your blood into your cells. When your cells stop responding well to insulin, your pancreas produces more of it to compensate. And elevated insulin has a direct effect on blood pressure. It tells your kidneys to hold on to sodium. It stimulates your nervous system in ways that raise pressure. And it promotes inflammation throughout your blood vessels. Here's the part that shocks many of my patients. You do not need to be diabetic for this to be happening. You don't even need to have a fasting blood sugar that shows up as abnormal on a standard test. Insulin resistance can be present for years, quietly raising your blood pressure and damaging your arteries, while your routine labs all look fine. The test that catches it, a fasting insulin level, is not part of a standard blood panel. Most patients have never had it done, and most doctors don't order it unless there's a specific reason to. I had a patient, a 71-year-old man, who ate what I would genuinely describe as a healthy diet. Mostly whole foods, limited sugar, some fruit, vegetables, lean protein. He walked regularly. He was not overweight. His blood sugar was normal. But his blood pressure was persistently elevated around 155/90 despite medication. We ran a fasting insulin test. His insulin was nearly 3 times the optimal level. He had significant insulin resistance that no standard test had caught in years of routine physicals. We addressed it specifically through changes to his meal timing and the composition of his meals. Over 6 months, his blood pressure came down to a level we hadn't seen in years. This is why I keep saying, the problem is rarely just salt. The 6th reason is one I specifically worry about in people who are already on blood pressure medication and still not seeing results. Certain common medications and supplements raise blood pressure, and many people don't make the connection. Nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, which are things like ibuprofen and naproxen, are widely used for joint pain and headaches. They're available over the counter. Most people consider them very safe. But they cause your kidneys to retain sodium and fluid, and they can blunt the effect of blood pressure medications significantly. I've seen patients whose blood pressure normalized once they stopped using these medications regularly, even though they were taking them in normal doses for what seemed like reasonable reasons. Decongestants, especially those containing pseudoephedrine, constrict blood vessels throughout your body. That's how they reduce congestion. But that same mechanism raises your blood pressure. Many people use these seasonally or during colds without realizing the effect. Some herbal supplements, including certain forms of licorice root, can cause significant sodium retention. Caffeine, in high amounts, can cause short-term spikes. And if you're on a specific medication for another condition, it may be working against your blood pressure treatment in ways that aren't obvious without looking at the whole picture together. The reason this is so easy to miss is that people don't think of over-the-counter medications as real medications when it comes to their blood pressure. They think of them as separate, harmless things, but your body doesn't categorize them that way. Does this sound familiar? Before you assume your blood pressure is just resistant to treatment, make a complete list of everything you take, including supplements, herbal remedies, and over-the-counter medications, and go through it with your doctor specifically in the context of blood pressure. The seventh reason is something that's developed slowly over decades in many people, and it's almost impossible to see from the inside. Arterial stiffness that goes beyond the normal aging process is a significant cause of persistent high blood pressure in older adults, and it often develops years before it becomes measurable in a concerning way. Your arteries are supposed to be somewhat elastic. Every time your heart beats and pushes blood out, healthy arteries expand slightly to absorb some of that force. This is called compliance. Stiffer arteries can't absorb that force, so the pressure spikes higher with every heartbeat. Over time, the body perceives this as a chronic state of elevated pressure and adapts accordingly, often in ways that make it worse. What causes arteries to stiffen beyond normal aging? Chronic inflammation is one of the biggest drivers. Inflammatory compounds in the blood, produced by everything from gum disease to gut imbalance to long-term stress, gradually damage the artery walls and replace the flexible tissue with stiffer material. High blood sugar, even at levels that don't qualify as diabetes, contributes. Smoking history contributes, sometimes decades later. And low levels of certain nutrients, particularly magnesium and vitamin K2, appear to play a role in how well artery walls maintain their flexibility. The important thing to understand here is that arterial stiffness doesn't show up on a standard blood pressure measurement the same way other causes do. You might have what's called isolated systolic hypertension, where the top number is high, but the bottom number is relatively normal. That pattern, common in people over 65, is often a sign of arterial stiffness more than anything else. And it responds to different interventions than the approaches people typically try first. The eighth reason is one that connects almost everything we've talked about, and it's the one I come back to most often in conversations with my patients. Your body's internal clock, which is your circadian rhythm, is a master regulator of your blood pressure. And after 60, it becomes increasingly disrupted in ways that most people don't see coming. Your blood pressure is supposed to follow a daily pattern. It rises gradually in the morning as you wake. It reaches a peak in the late morning to early afternoon. It dips in the evening, and it drops significantly during deep sleep. This is the natural rhythm. Every system in your body, your hormones, your kidneys, your heart, is tuned to this cycle. When that cycle gets disrupted, things go wrong quickly. And circadian disruption after 60 is extremely common. Light exposure patterns change. Sleep schedules shift. Meal timing becomes irregular. Social rhythms, which are powerful anchors for your internal clock, disappear after retirement for many people. And without those anchors, your body's internal clock starts to drift. When the clock drifts, your blood pressure rhythm drifts with it. Pressure stays elevated later into the evening. The nighttime dip diminishes or disappears. Morning levels are higher than they should be. And because this all happens gradually, it feels like your blood pressure is just getting harder to control, when in reality, your body has lost the rhythmic anchor that kept the system calibrated. I think of it like this. A well-functioning clock is precise because all its gears are coordinated. If one gear starts slipping, everything else adjusts to compensate. Eventually, the whole mechanism is working harder to keep the right time. Your cardiovascular system does the same thing when the circadian rhythm is disrupted. It compensates, but compensating has a cost. Now, let me tell you what I actually tell my patients when they come to me frustrated, when they've done everything they were told and nothing is working. This section is called what I tell my patients when nothing seems to work. The first thing I tell them is to focus on consistency rather than intensity. This applies to almost everything: sleep, exercise, meals, light exposure. Your body's regulatory systems don't respond well to large swings. They respond to patterns. If you go to bed at wildly different times each night, if you eat at completely different hours each day, if you're intensely active one day and completely sedentary the next, your internal systems can't find their rhythm. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be predictable. Choose a wake time and hold to it, even on weekends. Choose a rough window for meals and stay close to it. That consistency alone begins to restore some of the circadian anchoring that keeps blood pressure regulated. The second thing I tell them is to take sleep seriously as a medical priority, not just as rest. If you are waking multiple times a night, if you snore loudly, if you feel exhausted in the morning despite spending enough time in bed, these are medical symptoms. They deserve the same attention as a chest pain or shortness of breath. Get evaluated. Sleep apnea, in particular, is dramatically undertreated in the over 60 population, and it is one of the most powerful drivers of treatment-resistant high blood pressure that I see. The third thing is to reconsider what you eat, not just what you avoid. Most blood pressure advice focuses on restriction. Less salt, less fat, less alcohol. And restriction has value, but equally important is what you're adding. Foods rich in potassium, like bananas, avocados, sweet potatoes, and leafy greens, directly support kidney function in ways that help lower pressure. Magnesium, found in nuts, seeds, and dark chocolate, supports arterial relaxation. Fermented foods like yogurt, kefir, and sauerkraut support gut health, which, as we discussed, connects directly to blood pressure regulation. The goal is not just a low-salt diet. It's a nutrient-dense, microbiome-supporting diet that gives your body the raw materials it needs to regulate pressure properly. The fourth thing is to address meal timing, not just meal content. Eating late at night, particularly large meals within 2 to 3 hours of bed, interferes with your body's ability to shift into recovery mode. Your digestion requires significant blood flow, which keeps pressure elevated at a time when it should be dropping. Moving your last meal earlier, giving yourself a longer overnight window without food, gives your kidneys, your gut, and your cardiovascular system more time to do the restorative work they're designed to do during rest. The fifth thing I recommend is having a specific conversation with your doctor about your complete medication and supplement picture. Not a general conversation, but a specific one. Bring every bottle, every supplement, every over-the-counter medication. Ask your doctor directly, could any of these be contributing to my blood pressure or reducing the effectiveness of my blood pressure medication? This conversation often doesn't happen unless the patient initiates it. The sixth thing is to explore stress management as a physiological intervention, not a lifestyle preference. I understand that telling someone to reduce stress can feel unhelpful. You can't always change your circumstances, but you can change how your nervous system responds to them. Slow diaphragmatic breathing for 5 to 10 minutes a day has been shown in multiple studies to lower blood pressure, partly by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that counteracts the fight-or-flight response. It sounds almost too simple, but the mechanism is real, the research is solid, and the cost is nothing. It is one of the most underused tools in blood pressure management. The seventh thing is to ask your doctor about testing beyond the standard panel. Specifically, ask about a fasting insulin level. Ask about markers of inflammation, like C-reactive protein. Ask about a magnesium level. These are not exotic tests. They are often covered, but they are not routinely ordered, and the information they provide can completely change the approach to someone whose blood pressure hasn't responded to standard treatment. I want to close with something I say to almost every patient who leaves my office feeling defeated about their blood pressure. I tell them this: the fact that you've done everything you were told and it hasn't worked is not a sign that you are beyond help. It's a sign that the advice you were given was incomplete. Not wrong, just incomplete. Because most blood pressure advice was written for the average person, and you may not be the average case. You may have a specific hormonal pattern, a specific sleep issue, a specific gut imbalance, or a specific medication interaction that is working against you. And once you identify it, things can change relatively quickly, not overnight, but steadily. I've watched people who came to me with blood pressures that seemed immovable get them under control within 6 months, not by doing more of what wasn't working, but by identifying what they had missed and addressing it directly. The body wants to regulate itself. It's designed to. Sometimes it just needs the right conditions to do so. If you're over 60 and you're managing blood pressure, the most important thing I want you to take away from this video is that your situation is not hopeless, and it is not simple. It is specific to you. The answers are there. You just may not have been given the right questions yet. You are not out of options. You just haven't found the right door yet. And I genuinely believe that for most people, it exists. If this video helped you understand something you hadn't heard explained this way before, consider sharing it with someone you know who is dealing with the same frustration. Because this information deserves to reach the people who need it most.